The Eastern Conference looks completely different heading into this NBA season. It feels like almost every team got better. Superstars that were loyal to their teams for years switched jerseys, and there isn't one obvious favorite anymore. Every contender has a case, but only one of them is going to make it to the NBA Finals. Today I'm going to be ranking my top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference and breaking down exactly why I think each one of them has a real chance to come out of the East as of right now. But before we get into these rankings, I want to make one thing very clear. This isn't just based on who has the biggest names on their roster. I'm looking at coaching, depth, health, and which teams I believe are built to separate themselves over the course of the full season. Because even though there are a lot of good teams in the East, there are only a handful I genuinely believe will be in that conversation to contend all year long. Now let's get into it. Coming in at number 5, I have the Boston Celtics. This is probably the team that most people are going to disagree with, not because Boston isn't talented, they absolutely are, but because this is a completely different team than the one we've gotten used to over the last few years. The biggest storyline is obviously the Jaylen Brown trade. For years it felt like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were the identity of the Boston Celtics. Whether you loved them together or thought the fit just wasn't right, they were one of the league's best duos and gave Boston a chance to compete every single season. Now that era of Boston Celtics basketball is completely over. Instead, now Boston is betting that Paul George can be the perfect complementary piece next to Jason Tatum, and honestly I understand the idea, but only on paper and maybe a few years back too, because when healthy, Paul George is still one of the best two-way forwards in basketball. He can defend multiple positions, create his own shot, space the floor, and he doesn't need the offense to revolve around him to make an impact. On paper, that's a really clean basketball fit next to Tatum. The problem isn't the fit on paper though, it's the availability in real life. Paul George has dealt with injuries throughout the later stages of his career, and that's the biggest question surrounding this team right now. If he's healthy, Boston still has one of the better 1-2 punches in the Eastern Conference, but if he starts missing significant time, this team suddenly has to answer for a hole that I don't think it has the answers for. Outside of those two, I think the biggest storyline is going to be the supporting cast, because when you trade away a player like Jaylen Brown, those shots, those touches, and those minutes don't just disappear. Somebody else has to step into a much bigger role. The first guy that I look at is Peyton Pritchard. The biggest X factor on this whole entire roster might be him. We already know that he can shoot the lights out of the ball, but last season he showed us that there's another level to his game. He became more comfortable creating off the dribble, making plays for his teammates, and carrying stretches of the offense when Boston needed a spark. This year, those moments won't just be nice to have, they'll be expected from him every single game. With a bigger role waiting for him, Pritchard has a chance to go from one of the NBA's best role players to one of the most important players on the Celtics team, and if that happens, Boston could end up surprising a lot of people. Then you have all-reliable Derek White, who continues to be one of the most underrated guards in the NBA. He's the type of player every contender wants because he impacts the game without needing the ball in his hands. Sam Hauser is another player I'm watching this season because his shooting has always been valuable, but with Jaylen Brown gone, his floor spacing becomes even more important. Mitchell Robinson was another really interesting addition for this team. If he can stay healthy, he gives Boston another physical presence inside, improves their rebounding, and gives them another legitimate rim protector. And don't sleep on guys like Queta, Shireman, and Gonzalez either. Boston has done an excellent job developing role players over the last few years, and with the roster looking as different as it has in a very long time, one or two of those guys could end up carving out very meaningful roles this season. So there are definitely reasons to believe this team could still be one of the best in the East, but there are also a lot more question marks than we've seen from a Boston Celtics team in a very long time. Like, can Paul George stay healthy? Can Mitchell Robinson stay on the floor consistently? Can Peyton Pritchard successfully take the big leap that we're all expecting? And can this new group build chemistry after replacing one of the biggest pieces of their core? Now, don't get me wrong, I still expect the Celtics to win a lot of games because Jason Tatum is just that good, but compared to the 4 teams that I have ahead of them, I think that Boston has a little more uncertainty heading into this season. That's why I have the Boston Celtics barely coming in at number 5. Talking about a team that barely makes the list, this team would be nowhere close if this trade doesn't go through. And yes, I'm talking about the Kawhi Leonard trade. Coming in at number 4, I have the Toronto Raptors. Now, at the time of this video, it has just come out that the trade involving Kawhi Leonard would not go through until his investigation has been finished from the league. But if all things go as planned for Toronto, this is probably the team that's going to surprise people the most. A year ago, I don't think many people would have had Toronto anywhere near the top of the Eastern Conference. Now, I think they're one of the most dangerous teams in all of basketball. And the reason is very simple. Kawhi Leonard is back to the 6. 7 years after leading Toronto to its only championship in franchise history, the Raptors made one of the biggest moves of the offseason by bringing him back. Now, the trade is still waiting for the NBA's investigation into the Clippers scandal before it becomes official, but if everything goes through, this completely changes the outlook for this team, because here's the difference between the Raptors now and the Raptors we've watched over the last few years. Before, Scottie Barnes was being asked to be that guy every single night. line. Now he doesn't have to. That's what makes this whole thing scary. Scottie is still the future of this franchise, but now he gets to play alongside someone who's already climbed that mountain and won a championship. Kawhi doesn't need the ball every possession. He defends at an elite level, controls the pace of the game, and when you need a bucket late, he's still one of the clutchest players in the entire NBA. I also think this takes a ton of pressure off of Scottie Barnes. Instead of constantly seeing the opposing team's best defender, he'll have more room to attack, more opportunities as a playmaker, and a chance to keep developing without carrying the entire offense. Then you look at the rest of the roster. Immanuel Quickley is exactly the type of point guard this team needs. He pushes the pace, he can create his own shot, and he keeps everyone else around him involved. RJ Barrett quietly had one of the better stretches of his career after coming back home to Toronto. I think playing next to Kawhi is only going to make his life easier as well. Jakob Poeltl continues to be one of the most underrated centers in the entire NBA. He rebounds, protects the rim, sets great screens, and does all of the little things championship teams need. Then you got the young guys like Colin Murray Boyles, Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shead, and I'm not saying that all of them are going to become stars overnight, but Toronto has quietly built one of the deeper young rotations in the conference. If even one or two of those guys take another leap this season, this team becomes even more dangerous, and that's really why I have them this high. It's not just because Kawhi is back, it's because Kawhi Leonard fits exactly what this team was already missing. He gives them playoff experience, another elite defender, and he gives them a much needed closer. And most importantly, he allows Scottie Barnes to continue growing without having to carry the entire franchise on his back. The biggest question, of course, is going to be the scandal and health. Kawhi has dealt with injuries throughout his entire career, and if he's not available, this team looks very different. But if he stays on the floor, I genuinely believe Toronto has enough talent, enough defense, and enough depth to finish near the top of the Eastern Conference, if not number one. That's why I have the Raptors coming in at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, I have the Miami Heat. This is where this list really starts to get interesting, because if we're talking about teams that completely changed their future this offseason, I don't think anyone tops Miami. After years of waiting for another superstar to pair with Bam Adebayo, Pat Riley finally made his move. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a part of the Miami Heat, and just like that, this team went from being a solid playoff team to a legitimate contender in the Eastern Conference. The fit is honestly scary. Acquiring Giannis gives you arguably the most dominant downhill player in basketball, while Bam gives you one of the most versatile defensive bigs in the entire league. Those two alone are going to make life miserable for opposing teams. Just think about it. Giannis is going to be constantly attacking the rim, collapsing defenses, grabbing rebounds, and pushing the pace, while Bam can switch onto guards, protect the paint, facilitate from the elbow, and now he doesn't have to force offense every possession because Giannis is taking so much of that responsibility now. I actually think Bam is one of the biggest winners from this trade. Instead of carrying the offense, he can focus on being the defensive anchor we already know that he is, while picking his spots offensively. Then you look at the other guys like Andrew Wiggins. I think this is one of the best situations that he's been in since his championship year in Golden State. He's no longer being asked to be a star. He can focus on defending elite wings, cutting without the ball, knocking down open threes, and using his athleticism in transition. That's the version of Andrew Wiggins we've seen help championship teams before. Another addition I really like is Bobby Portis. Every contender needs that guy who changes the energy when he checks into the game. Portis brings toughness, he rebounds, he stretches the floor, he plays with emotion, and he gives Miami another reliable scoring option whenever Giannis or Bam goes to the bench. Tim Hardaway Jr. is another really great underrated pickup. After losing Tyler Hero in the Giannis trade, Miami needed somebody who could replace some of that perimeter scoring, and Hardaway fits that role perfectly. He understands how to play without the basketball, he's comfortable letting the stars create, and he's a type of veteran shooter Giannis has always benefited from playing alongside. I also think that Miami's depth deserves a lot more credit than people are giving it. Davion Mitchell has become one of the better defensive guards in the entire league, and Spoelstra's gonna love having somebody who can pressure opposing ball handlers 94 feet. Pele Larson quietly earned Spoel's trust last season because he does all of the little things. He defends, moves without the ball, makes smart decisions, and every winning team needs a player just like that. I expect for Pele to take another step this year, improving in all areas. Nikola Jovic is another interesting player because his versatility gives Miami a completely different look offensively and defensively. At his size, he can handle the ball, make plays for others, and stretch the floor. If he finally takes the leap everybody has been waiting for, Miami becomes even tougher to guard. I'm also really excited to see what Ryan Conwell could become. I don't expect him to have too much of a massive role right away, but Miami traded up to get him for a reason. I believe he's one of the better shooters in this rookie class, and if anybody knows how to develop a role player, it's definitely Erik Spoelstra. Speaking of Coach Spo, I think he's the biggest advantage this whole entire organization has. Every single season, he finds a way to maximize whatever roster you throw in front of him. He makes the right adjustments, and he gets production from players other teams overlook. That's why I'm never comfortable betting against Miami. Now, they aren't perfect. Trading for Giannis meant saying goodbye to Tyler Hero, Khalil Ware, and Jaime Jaquez Jr., which is a lot of young talent and scoring to replace. Chemistry is gonna definitely matter. Guys are gonna have to embrace different roles, holes, and they're gonna need this roster to stay healthy. But when I look at this team, I see one of the best defensive front courts in basketball. I see veterans who know exactly what their jobs are, and I see one of the best coaches in the NBA history leading all of it. That's why I have the Miami Heat coming in at number 3. Coming in at number 2, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. Every single year, it feels like we're asking the same question about Philadelphia. Is this finally the year? For the longest time, it always felt like something was missing. Maybe they didn't have enough shot creation, maybe they didn't have enough wing depth, maybe they were too reliant on Joel Embiid. Whatever it was, there was always one weakness that you could point to. Heading into this season, I honestly don't see as many holes. This might be the most complete roster Joel Embiid has ever had. Obviously, it all starts with the former MVP. When Joel Embiid is on the floor, Philadelphia has a chance against anybody. I believe he's still the best scoring center in basketball, one of the league's best defenders, and someone every team has to game plan around before they even step onto the court. But the difference this year is what happens when the ball isn't in Embiid's hands. The Sixers finally have multiple players who can go create offense by themselves. Tyrese Maxey has continued to develop into one of the fastest and most explosive guards in the NBA. Every year his decision making gets better, he's become more comfortable as a playmaker, and his chemistry with Embiid keeps improving. Then you add a solidified superstar like Jaylen Brown. I think Jaylen Brown changes everything for this team. Philadelphia has been searching for another elite two-way wing for years, and now they finally have one. He's going to take on the toughest defensive assignments, and he's another player who can create his own shot late in games. And most importantly, he gives the Sixers someone who can take the pressure off of Embiid and Maxey when defenses start loading up. That's a huge difference compared to previous seasons. But what really moved Philadelphia this high for me wasn't just the stars, it was the depth. Anthony Simons gives them another proven scorer who can come off the bench or slide into different lineups depending on the matchup. That's the type of offensive firepower good teams usually don't have outside of their starting five. I also think that Dean Wade is one of those underrated additions that's going to help them win a couple games in the long run. He defends multiple positions, spaces the floor, doesn't force shots if any at all. If anything, you kind of want him to force shots, and every contender needs players willing to do the dirty work. Then you start looking at the younger guys. VJ Edgecombe might not have to carry a huge role immediately, and that's actually ideal. He can learn behind veterans while bringing athleticism, defense, and energy whenever he's on the floor. But even in a smaller role, I think he's going to make his presence felt. He's the kind of player who can swing the momentum with a couple of hustle plays, get out in transition, and he gives you real defensive intensity out there on the perimeter. And as the season goes on, I wouldn't be surprised if his impact grows, especially if he can consistently impact the game on both ends of the floor. Justin Edwards, Dominic Barlow, and Caleb Love are also some young players I'm excited to see. We saw some flashes from them last season, and I'm kind of interested to see how they continue to develop into this team that's going to need a lot of help from their rotation players. And that's why I think Philadelphia is different this year. It's not just that they have stars, it's that they finally have answers. If Embiid has an off night, Maxey and Brown can carry more of the scoring. If someone misses time, they have real NBA players ready to step up to bigger roles. If a matchup calls for something different, I know Nick Nurse has options all over this roster. The only reason I don't have them at number 1 is because the team ahead of them already has more momentum heading into the season. But from a talent standpoint, I believe this is the strongest Philadelphia roster we've seen in a very long time. That's why I have the 76ers coming in at number 2. Let's not waste any more time. Coming in at number 1, I have the defending NBA champions, the New York Knicks. And honestly, after what they just accomplished, I don't think anybody should be surprised. The Knicks didn't just have a strong regular season or make another deep run, they finished the job. They ended a championship drought that lasted more than 5 decades, proved this core can win together, and now they're entering this season with almost every important piece still in place. That's the biggest reason I still have them at number 1. Every other team we've discussed is trying to introduce a major new piece, replace somebody new, or figure out how a new group fits together. The Knicks already know exactly who they are, and everything starts with the captain, Jalen Brunson. At this point, there shouldn't be any debate about whether Brunson could be the best player on a championship run. He just proved it. He's the leader of this group, the player they trust with the ball when the game gets tight, and one of the toughest guards in basketball to stop once he gets into the paint. Brunson isn't one of the biggest or the most athletic players on the floor, but he controls the game with his footwork, patience, strength, and ability to create space. And now he's entering another season with a roster perfectly built around him. Karl-Anthony Towns gives something very few teams can match at the center position. His shooting pulls opposing big men away from the basket, opens driving lanes for Brunson, and gives the Knicks another player capable of taking over offensively. But what impressed me most last season was that Cat showed he could impact winning beyond simply putting up points. He rebounded the heck out of the ball, competed physically, accepted his role, and when the Knicks needed him most during their championship run, he delivered. Then you look at all the wings. Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby give New York two of the most versatile defenders in basketball. They can pick up the other team's best scorers, switch across multiple positions, create turnovers, and still provide enough offense that defenses can't ignore. Bridges gives you somebody who can score without demanding the ball and defend the opposing team's best player every single night without missing games. OG brings physicality, strength, shooting, and the ability to guard players ranging from quick guards all the way to centers. Having those two next to Brunson and Towns is what makes this starting group so balanced. And then there's Josh Hart. I don't even know if there's one position or role that completely explains what Hart does for this team. He rebounds like a power forward, he pushes the ball like a guard, and he makes plays for other people. He cuts, he defends, and whenever the Knicks need an extra possession, it always feels like Josh Hart is a player who finds a way to go and get it. Those 5 players already proved that they could win a championship together, but I also think New York's bench deserves way more credit than it gets. Miles McBride gives them another strong perimeter defender who can pressure guards, knock down open shots, and play next to Brunson whenever New York wants to use a smaller backcourt. Jose Alvarado brings even more defensive pressure and energy. He's gonna pick up players full court, create chaos, and give the second unit somebody capable of changing the pace of the game almost immediately. Jordan Clarkson gives this bench something different. He's not gonna be asked to carry the team, but he can still heat up pretty quickly. He can get up his own shot, and he can help prevent those stretches where the offense becomes too dependent on the starters. Landry Shamet also earned his place in the rotation after his playoff run. He gave New York reliable shooting throughout its championship season, and he was especially valuable because he didn't need many touches to affect the game. He moves without the ball, understands where he needs to be, and gives Brunson another shooter defenses have to respect. Now, the biggest change is at center. Mitchell Robinson is no longer here, and you can't completely ignore that loss. He gave the Knicks elite offensive rebounding, rim protection, and another physical presence who could completely change certain matchups. But replacing him with Andre Drummond makes sense. Drummond isn't going to replace everything that Robinson did defensively, but he's still one of the best rebounders of this generation. He gives New York size, physicality, and somebody who can keep the Knicks competitive on the glass whenever Towns goes to the bench. They also kept Mohamed Diawara, who gave them promising minutes as a rookie and now has another season to develop inside a winning organization. New York doesn't need him to suddenly become a star, they just need him to keep developing, defend, bring energy, and gradually become another dependable piece in this rotation. And that's what separates the Knicks from everybody else on this list. They aren't searching for an identity, they aren't hoping for their stars to eventually figure out how to play together, and they aren't relying on one major offseason gamble to completely change their offseason. They're bringing back the same championship core that already knows exactly what it takes to finish the job. Now, repeating is never easy. Every team is going to give New York its best shot. The Eastern Conference improved, and the Knicks did lose an important piece in Mitchell Robinson, but until another team proves it can knock them off, I have to give the number 1 spot to the New York Knicks. They have a proven number 1 option in Brunson, they have an elite offensive big in Towns, and they have 2 high-level defensive wings in Bridges and Anunoby. They have depth, toughness, shooting, and players who understand their roles. Most importantly though, they have the confidence that comes from already winning together. That's why I have the defending champion New York Knicks coming in at number 1 in the Eastern Conference, and these are my top 5 Eastern Conference teams heading into the 2027 NBA season. Now, obviously, these rankings aren't set in stone. The NBA changes real fast, and there's still some huge questions hanging over the Eastern Conference and the free agency market. Like, what happens if LeBron James decides to head east? And what if the Kawhi Leonard situation with the Toronto Raptors falls apart and that trade never gets finalized? One move like that could completely reshape these rankings overnight. But based on everything that we know today, this is exactly how I see the Eastern Conference heading into this new season. Now, I want to hear from you guys. If you made it this far, I know you have real basketball knowledge, so do me a favor, like the video if you want more basketball breakdowns like this, and subscribe to the channel so I can keep you informed and entertained with more videos of the players the world keeps sleeping on. Welcome to Sleeping on the Clock. If they're sleeping on it, we're speaking on it.